Hello and welcome to the Gaggle Book Challenge, and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, yesterday we talked about the preparations for war from the voices of Jens Stoltenberg, NATO Secretary General, Radek Sikorski, Polish Foreign Minister. We talked about Emmanuel Macron as well, the political leaders who are rushing Europe into a war. But there's another aspect to it, which is that the public is being acclimatized to the sense that Russia is ubiquitous everywhere, terrifying us and threatening us. And we have to be absolutely vigilant because, underneath every bed is an Ivan Popov,
and be careful of drinking water. It could be tainted.
Exactly, the drinking water. And so just within the last few weeks, we have, in one country after another, we had, extraordinary hysteria over spies, terrorists, subversives, and saboteurs, and all linked to Russia. So I just want to show you a few examples of these stories. And here we have, so this is from Britain. First of all, let's start with the United Kingdom, because the United Kingdom is really the epicenter of this. They're driving this hysteria. So it says, British man charged with acting on behalf of Russia in plot to torch Ukrainian-linked business. Okay, Ukrainian-linked. You never know what linked means. So again, and then you see this word plot. So in other words, it didn't happen. All right, that's the first thing. So whatever is being accused of, it never happened.
But it was linked to something.
But it was linked to something.
Even in the title, that gets farther and farther and farther away.
That's right, Ukrainian linked. And then he says, a British man accused of plotting to torch a London business connected to Ukraine has been charged with conducting hostile activity to benefit Russia. Dylan Earl, 20, is connected to Russia's Wagner mercenary groups. So he's 20. Okay. Okay. So, well, this is really pretty chilling. He's a 20-year-old. I mean, in other words, he's just barely out of high school. And so he's already sounds pretty terrifying. The UK government has declared a banned terrorist organization. Why are they a terrorist organization? But anyway,
I'd be very curious what Dylan's connection is. Did he visit their website?
Or right, yes, quite connected.
Did he buy paraphernalia?
Connected.
Earl
is accused of fraud, carrying out reconnaissance of targets, and recruiting others to assist Russian intelligence services in the UK. So it's all of 20, and he's already doing all this on behalf of Russia.
Sounds like a talented man. MI6 needs to, look into him. Okay.
That's right. Included in the alleged activity was involvement in the planning of an arson attack on a Ukrainian-linked commercial property in March. So he's planning an arson attack. Okay, a Ukrainian linked. I mean, but again, how do we know there's a Russians involved? Maybe it was an insurance scheme, arson. Maybe it was a plot to steal from the insurance company. But anyway, said Nick Price, head of the Crown Prosecution Service, Special Crime and Counterterrorism Division. That's very impressive.
That sounds like a TV series.
It does rather, yeah. I can see a TV show that needs developing here. He allegedly planned and paid others to burn down 2 shipping businesses at an industrial park in East London on March 20th. So he planned and he paid others to burn down 2 shipping businesses at an industrial park. Okay, where did the money come from? I mean, all right. The target of the fire was named.
You need a lot of money to burn 2 businesses. I mean, isn't that just 2 cans of gasoline? And
I'd have thought. The target of the fire was named as Mr. X in the court charges. Mr.
Okay.
X. Yeah, okay. Then it says NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. So this is the same story. Jens Stoltenberg cited the case Friday during a visit to Berlin, saying members must remain vigilant regarding covert Russian activities across the alliance. So the guy's just been charged. This 20-year-old, young man has been charged, and Stoltenberg is already sounding off in Berlin. NATO allies stand in full solidarity with Germany and the United Kingdom. Such acts are dangerous and unacceptable. They will not deter us from providing support to Ukraine, and we are coordinating closely in our response to any hostile act against NATO allies. So we're standing shoulder to shoulder against this 20-year-old. This is because we will not be intimidated by this old guy.
Meanwhile, NATO, we widely believe, is supporting terrorist activities within Russia.
Exactly. So here's another AP story. Britain to expel Russian attaché in response to, quote, reckless and dangerous activities by Moscow. So it says here, Britain will expel Russia's defense attaché over spying allegations as part of several measures the government announced Wednesday to target Moscow's intelligence gathering operations in the UK. Home Secretary James Cleverly, it's never a good idea to have a name like Cleverly.
Yeah, we've been over this territory. I think it's very unfortunate because he's proven himself to be anything but clever. But
said the measures were aimed at what he called the, quote, reckless and dangerous activities of the Russian government across Europe. The latest round of measures will boot the attaché Maxim Milovic, a Russian colonel who the government termed an, quote, undeclared military intelligence officer. Well, he's a defense attaché. I mean, what do you think a defense attaché does? I mean, I don't know.
Keeping up on prices of
eggs
in supermarkets in the UK. Okay.
It will also rescind the diplomatic status of several Russian-owned properties because they are believed to have been used for intelligence purposes, and impose new restrictions on Russian diplomatic visas and visits. So this is all very, very impressive.
Well, I mean, what they're doing, honestly, is they're trying to show that there is a threat, and they're doing something about it. That's all this is.
I agree. Absolutely. And of course, the media happily regurgitate this stuff without the slightest critical sense or anything. You just take on board everything that James Cleverly says, and you never, question anything or just, oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're any kind of Russian attaché in a NATO country, of course you're going to be looking for valuable information to send back home. That's their job.
That's their job. And that's the point about diplomats. I mean, part of your job as a diplomat is to gather information. I mean, you're there, people want to know back home what actually is going on in this country. You're gathering information. And that means meeting people, talking to people, not just reading the newspapers. Anyone can just read the newspapers. The whole point
and flipping people if you can.
If you can, yeah. In the coming days, we should expect accusations of Russophobia, conspiracy theories, and hysteria from the Russian government, Cleverly said in Parliament. This is not new, and the British people and the British government will not fall for it. I just love it. They always present themselves as the victims. Oh, yeah, we will not fall for it. We will,
But there goes Cleverly being not clever. In the coming days, we should expect accusations of Russophobia, conspiracy theories, and hysteria from the Russian government. Yeah, but what else would you expect?
Yeah, and will not be taken for fools by Putin's. Well, they don't have to try. Putin's bots, trolls, and lackeys don't have to work hard to make you a fool. And this is always a classic in all these news stories. At the end, Maria Zakharova, spokesperson for Russia's foreign ministry, told the Associated Press that Russia will respond in kind. There's always this sort of Russia denies the accusations. That's it. Oh, now we've done our job. We've done our journalism. We've shown both sides. So having said blah 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 about Russia, Russia has denied the accusations. Maria Zakharova said that we will respond in kind. And then we have the UK had an uneasy relationship with Russia for years, accusing its agents of targeted killings and espionage, including cyber attacks aimed at British parliamentarians and leaking and amplifying sensitive information to serve Russian interests.
Now, that's called uneasy.
Uneasy. But of course, Britain never does anything. Britain never does any spying or we just don't do that sort of thing.
Well, if they spent more time on trying to unearth Russian spies in the UK, rather than planning the destruction of the Crimea Bridge, maybe they could better their game, George.
Right, that's right. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Britain has also sanctioned hundreds of wealthy Russians and moved to clamp down on money laundering through London's property and financial markets. Good luck with that. I mean, money laundering is it's London's most lucrative business.
That's exactly right. And you know what? Since the end of the Soviet Union, particularly from Russia, the amount of money British banks have made laundering illicit gains it's hard to fathom, George. Exactly. You wonder sometimes if their entire banking system could survive if they didn't do this. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Because they're so laxed about it. Yes. There was, I think it was Bank Moskva. This was like 20 years ago. One day, one of the shareholders took off with a huge amount of money, ended up in London, and I'm just an opponent of Putin. Justifying his theft.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. Oh, well, he's a dissident. He's an opponent of Putin, and he stole all this money. Stole Russian people's money. But London's property market is entirely geared towards money laundering. I mean, people don't live in these properties. It's just this is where you park your money before you move it somewhere else, which is why housing is completely unaffordable in London. The government said Wednesday's actions followed criminal cases in London alleging espionage and sabotage by people acting on behalf of Russia.
I want to know a little bit more about Daryl. I mean, is there anything?
Yeah, and there's not much, I'm afraid.
Pretty scanty.
Very scanty. We don't, exactly. I mean, this almost nothing. They just report this, and then that's it.
It could have been just a personal grudge or something. I mean, for all we know.
I don't know. I mean, a 20-year-old. Exactly. He may just be, whatever. May even have mental health issues. Who knows? I mean, he's supposed to set fire. It just so happened this was Ukrainian-linked property, and it's Russia is behind this. It also cited allegations that the Russian government planned to sabotage military aid for Ukraine in Germany and Poland and carried out spying in Bulgaria and Italy, along with cyber and disinformation activities, airspace violations, and jamming GPS signals to hamper civilian air traffic. And then David Cameron. So happy he's back. I mean, we really missed him.
But he's good material, so
he's always good, yeah. Since the illegal invasion of Ukraine, Russia's attempts to undermine UK and European security have become increasingly brazen, says the man who just said, yeah, go right ahead, use our missiles, hit Russian targets, whatever targets you want inside Russia. These measures are an unequivocal message to the Russian state. Their actions will not go unanswered. Ooh, he's a tough guy. And then now we go to switch to Germany. And he says, Germany arrests 2 for allegedly spying for Russia, plotting sabotage to undermine Ukraine aid. I still don't get why doing these things somehow undermines Ukraine aid. I still don't get the cause and effect, the motive aspect of it. But
yeah, but again, this is something that wasn't done. It was
exactly. It's always plotting. the plot. And then 2 German-Russian men have been arrested in Germany on suspicion of espionage, one of them accused of agreeing to carry out attacks on potential targets, including US military facilities, in hopes of sabotaging aid for Ukraine. The 2, identified only as Dieter S. and Alexander J., were arrested in the Bavarian city of Bayreuth. Wagner's city. Maybe they can link something called Wagner, the Wagner group, Federal prosecutors said prosecutors allege Dieter S. had been discussing possible acts of sabotage in Germany with a person linked to Russian intelligence since October. So he's been discussing, he's been having these discussions with a person linked to Russian intelligence.
Yeah, I wonder who was buying the drinks, George.
That's right. Yeah.
Remember George Papadopoulos? What was his Papadopoulos?
Papadopoulos, George Papadopoulos.
Yeah, booze him up and let him talk.
That's it. Yeah. And that the main aim was to undermine military support given by Germany to Ukraine. The suspect declared himself willing to carry out bombing and arson attacks on infrastructure used by military and industrial sites in Germany. They added that he gathered information on potential targets, including US military facilities. I like this. He declared himself willing. So you have to then wonder that this is obviously a setup. This was obviously infiltrated by German security services, and you had a little tape recorder. Are you willing to carry out bombing and arson? Yeah, I'm willing. Okay, good.
But also, would you be willing? How about if I give you this amount of money?
Yeah.
Do we have the entire conversation here?
No. You see, that's the thing. This is what the newspapers do. They just report the stuff, prosecutors' allegations, and then you're always saying, well, this is set up, just like in the United States, they're being set up by the German security services. And then he goes on, prosecutors did not name any specific location in the suspect sites. German news agency DPA and the magazine Der Spiegel reported, without citing sources, that the locations allegedly snooped on include the US Grafenwöhr military base.
George, also, you're right bringing up this is how the FBI operates. Did they give any background on, did this person have mental health issues?
Right.
Did they have brushes with the law? Were they unemployed?
Right.
Did they, what kind of affiliations they had? We have no information about these things at all. The reason why I'm bringing it up, and I'm not looking for special pleading, is that the number of times the FBI has found disaffected young Muslim men and prodded them along. It's extremely well documented in many cases.
But it's not just and then of course in the case of the Fednapping in Michigan with the governor, I forgot her name, the one that were planning again, that was entirely a setup by the FBI. Again, they picked on some really poor, like literally poor. They had no money. And then, very, very disaffected, and then essentially just egging them on. This was
and one of the feds that infiltrates said, "I can get the arms. Oh, don't worry, I'll get the I can get some money. Don't worry about it." It was completely led by FBI.
Entirely, exactly. Everything was done by, but they were planning everything. They were encouraging, they were enabling them. So it wasn't just we were just simply spying on what they were up to. No, you created the plot. You instigated the plot. And there's Germany's top security officials, Interior Minister Nancy Faeser, we've come across her before, said Russia's ambassador was summoned to the foreign ministry in Berlin. She vowed that Germany will continue to thwart any such Russian threats. We will continue to give Ukraine massive support, and will not let ourselves be intimidated. So little Germany is being intimidated.
Yeah, but it's really strange. If these are acts of sabotage and whatnot, aren't you more concerned with your own national security? Why are they going on and on about Ukraine? Okay. It's very strange to me.
Yeah, exactly. And you kind of think again, why are they going on? Like, What are Germans very concerned about? Germans are pretty concerned about immigration, the rate of immigration into Germany and the crime wave that has resulted in. That's kind of what they think about. Then, but they want to focus on Ukraine and Russia, which is really not what the German people are concerned with. Then we have Poland. Poland detains 9 people suspected of spying for Russia.
Again, suspected. All these spies, they're not very successful, are they? They don't achieve any results.
No, it's like these assassinations. They never get, they never kill anyone. The Polish authorities said that the nation's security services detained members of a Russian espionage ring, alleging they were preparing acts of sabotage in Poland and had been monitoring railroad routes used for the transport of weapons into Ukraine.
So hold on here. Okay, detain members of a Russian espionage ring in Poland. Poles? Sure. Really? Yeah. That's really quite interesting that they've been able to flip Poles, okay? Right. Or it's unsaid if they're Polish or not.
Exactly. I mean, I think it's not clear. It's not clear, but that's right. Interior Minister Mariusz Kaminski said the Internal Security Agency arrested 9 people suspected of spying for Russia. 3 were detained on Wednesday. He said at a news conference in Warsaw that the suspects were preparing sabotage actions aimed at paralyzing the supply of equipment, weapons, and aid to Ukraine. And then says, he said the security agency also seized cameras, electronic equipment, and GPS transmitters, which the suspects plan to place on transports carrying aid to Ukraine. I thought they wanted to sabotage it to make sure there's nothing. So, I mean, or they're going to put electronic equipment. This is Defense Minister Mariusz Blaszczak suggested that the group entered from Belarus. Okay, so they said Belarus. Okay. A Russian ally that borders NATO member Poland.
So they're Belarusian?
I think they are.
Or Russian?
I think they're Belarusian. The threat was real, Blaszczak said on state radio. The evening news bulletin of the Belarusian state television confirmed that the 3 detainees are citizens of Belarus. Their relatives denied in interviews that the detainees were involved in a Russian spy ring. And then Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said that 9 people have been jailed on allegations of having engaged themselves directly into acts of sabotage in Poland on commission from Russian intelligence services, and described them as hired people, sometimes from the criminal world, and nationals of Ukraine, Belarus, and Poland.
Okay, well, they just sound like people of opportunity. Okay,
right.
We need this done. You pay. Well, what are you paying? Okay, that's what right. It sounds like to me. Okay?
That's what it sounds like. If they're from the criminal world, they're there for hire. But to do what exactly? I mean, it sounds like this is just made up. That the goal was to stop arms going to Ukraine. I mean, it's like I'm not sure exactly what the goal, if there was indeed a goal, or whether that they just simply made the whole thing up. They just arrested some people and then made up, they're involved in this plot. He described these acts as beatings, arson, and attempted arson. I don't know. I couldn't understand whom were they beating, because and then he said that also other nations in the region, especially Lithuania and Latvia, were threatened with sabotage and provocation.
Were threatened. So did any sabotage and provocation occur?
Well, that's the thing.
It looks like no crimes have been committed.
No,
yet.
And that's the thing that strikes you as you read these stories, and these are all stories that just appeared in the last few days. There's nothing going on. I mean, you're just sort of making up crimes when no crimes have been committed. They're all plots, threats. I love the arson and attempted arson. So you're charged with arson and attempted arson.
I just have to wonder how much alcohol or illicit drugs was involved in all of this. Okay, seriously.
So
It's something that George has mentioned over and over again, and he's absolutely right. This is a pattern that it's been received from the United States. You
Yep.
know, the Michigan
Right.
was Gretchen. What was her name?
Gretchen Whitmer. That's the one. Gretchen
Yeah,
Whitmer. Exactly.
January
Yeah,
6th.
exactly.
Okay. And there are numerous cases again against young Muslim men.
That's right.
And so
Exactly.
this is a pattern.
Right. Exactly. So here is our friend Kaja Kallas, Estonian leader. Russia is waging a shadow war on the West that needs a collective response. I wonder, is there any time when she doesn't say Russia is waging some kind of a war? I mean, news would be, I don't think Russia is waging a war on the West. That would be news. I mean, this really is kind of dog bites man. Russia is waging a shadow war on the West that needs a collective response.
My sense is she just got time on her hands, George.
I think she has. I think so. I don't think there's anything to do if you're Estonian prime minister. I think I think it's such a
well, maybe to her credit, she's just reminding the world that her little country exists. Okay, I don't know. I still think she's just angling for her next job.
Yeah, I'm sure that's right. Yeah, absolutely. So it says here, perched on the open ramp at the rear of a British Chinook helicopter, Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas flew home from the annual spring storm military exercises, pleased to see NATO allies cooperating. But she later said that other types of warfare were on her mind. Her nation, which borders Russia, has seen a rise in sabotage, electronic warfare, and spying, all blamed on Moscow. And then here, there's a picture, this is NATO chic.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah, NATO chic. Look, and she's very, very nicely attired. She's got the sunglasses, the helmet, but it's very fetching attire.
Yes. Oh yeah. I mean, making an aggressive military alliance sexy. Yep.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. This is NATO chic.
I mean, George. I mean, look. I mean, the whole thing is for a photo op. I mean, that's all it is. I mean, who knows if she was actually in a helicopter, but she's wearing the gear. Okay.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And
what do you think? What could she be possibly saying of interest to this soldier?
I don't think so. He's kind of pretending to be.
Can you ask the photographer for a different angle? I'm better on the other side. Okay.
I think so. Yes. But the way she puts herself, she's in the center of the photograph, and she's somehow explaining something or other to the soldier. But she's not even wearing fatigues. I mean, it looks like some kind of a leather jacket, and it's a very, very, very fetching attire. And then she goes on. Kallas says Russia is conducting a shadow war against the West. Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda urged vigilance, saying he had information that acts of sabotage can happen again. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said at least 9 people were recently arrested on suspicion of beatings and arson, allegedly.
Again, beatings. Who was beaten?
It's frustrating. We want to know the beatings. Allegedly directed by Russia's secret service, and described them as Ukrainian, Belarusian, and Polish nationals, some from the criminal world. And then, because many Russian intelligence operatives already are sanctioned, Western officials and experts say the Kremlin is shifting tactics, hiring others for hybrid operations, non-military strategies, including cyber attacks, election interference, and disinformation. I thought they were already doing that. I mean, we've been doing this for years. I always thought Russia was already doing election disinformation, election interference, and cyber attacks.
And attacks on foes of President Vladimir Putin.
That's right.
What foes?
Oh, they're going to come to that. I mean, it's one of those things that's very interesting. When you look at these stories, every time somebody gets a stomachache, they immediately claim, "Oh, I'm the victim of a poison attack. I've been poisoned," and then the prosecutor, usually German prosecutor, yeah, we're investigating a possible assassination. So you had a bad pasty, and you now got a stomachache. Hey, it's Putin who's trying to poison you.
Well, but the use of poison hasn't been very effective, has it?
No, not really. I mean, but there's just this insatiable appetite for stories about, Russia. This is just Russia porn. I mean, it's like
Yeah, there you go. That's it.
you kind
That's
of
it.
feeding this insatiable appetite for Russia porn. Um, with crucial allegations in the West, officials say they believe the tempo of such activities will only increase and some want tougher countermeasures.
Okay, so well, the countermeasures is to censor,
Yep.
is to shut down freedom of speech, of
Yep.
assembly.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
That's the account
that's
exactly.
the aim. That's
That's
the
the aim.
whole
Exactly.
point.
That's right. Exactly. That's what countermeasures. Exactly. We need to crack down on platforms. There's all free speech platform. We need to crack down. Kallas cited a warning from an intelligence agency to a European country that one of its warehouses was targeted by Russian military intelligence. When a
Okay,
fire,
he cited and a warning from an intelligence agency to a European country that one of its warehouse. You mean her in her
well, that's
country in
what
Estonia?
it's, this is what's known as bad writing. When
Yeah,
you,
I mean, she's being told that there's a warehouse in Belgium. Well, she's the
exactly, it's
Estonian
not
prime
clear,
minister. Why?
You see, AP, they've abandoned the elementary rules of grammar, which is don't get confused with nouns and pronouns. You've got basically two antecedents for the pronouns, and no one exactly knows. Are we talking about Estonia with a warehouse in Estonia, or is it a warehouse somewhere else? When a fire occurred at the warehouse 2 weeks later, officials in the country suggested we don't know if it's the Russians. So it sounds like is somewhere else. Kallas did not identify the country. The West must have a serious discussion of a coordinated approach, he said. How far do we let them go on our soil? I mean, as far as I understand the story, she's complaining that this European country wasn't taking the Russian threat seriously. So Bigwin said, well, I don't know, we don't know if it's the Russians. And then says, well, we need a serious discussion of a coordinated approach. How
Well,
far?
you have to realize, George, I mean, if she's not talking about the Russian threat, nobody's listening to her talking about anything.
No,
It's true. It's true. I mean,
right,
that's her calling card. Okay.
right,
That's
right,
her calling card into that will open doors for the
right,
future for her.
right,
Okay.
right.
She's the perfect acolyte, isn't she? And she's worried about another country's warehouse. Good for you, hon. Okay.
It's true. You're a prime minister, and you're worried about a fire in a warehouse somewhere in Europe. Nothing else. It's like it's very. She's kind of like the Finn chick. Well, I'm the prime minister, so I'm going off to a party, and he's like, well, what if there's a war or anything like that? While you're stoned out of your mind at a party. Well, somebody else can take care of it. Um, so
Such unserious people,
very
George.
unserious, yeah. But they're all very nice looking, and I think that's again part of NATO chic. You put your prime minister, your foreign minister, they all have to be very good looking. Estonia has taken the challenge of finding Russian agents of influence, quote, very seriously, unquote, since regaining independence from the USSR in 1991, rebuilding its security services from scratch. U.S. Ambassador George Kent told AP. George Kent, if people don't remember, he's the guy. You remember he took part in impeachment one. He's the guy with the bow tie.
He disgraced about the bow tie. I'm angry to this day about it. Okay, and he was really tweedy. Okay, I mean,
Yeah.
George, you don't wear tweed to Congress. Sorry. Okay, it's just, and plus it was too. Nobody wears tweed in the summer. It's just bad form. Okay.
This year in Estonia, a university professor was arrested on charges of spying for Moscow. 13 people were arrested over attacks allegedly organized by Russian military intelligence operating under diplomatic cover. and flights between Finland and the city of Tartu were disrupted by Russian jamming of GPS signals. Now, notice how everything is just said, in this matter-of-fact way, AP not calling any of this into question. So they say 13 people were arrested over attacks allegedly organized by Russian military intelligence. What attacks? I mean, what are we talking about? What kind of attack? Who are these 13 people? And then they say a university professor was arrested on charges of spying. And then, yeah, but I mean, you can arrest anyone and claim, oh, he's a spy. I mean, you kind of have to present some evidence. And then he says this between Finland and the city of Tartu were disrupted by Russian jamming of GPS signals. Do you know that? I mean, you know that this happened?
Well, it's one of these things, George, that remember the ammo dump that blew up in
Well, we're going to come to that. That's going to pop.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just going to say before we get to that, a lot of the things that we're mentioning here is that, well, that's just degradation of infrastructure in the West. Okay, when something goes wrong, you have to blame somebody else, but blame the Russians because that's that you can get off scot-free. Oh, well, then that explains everything. No, I mean, that Baltimore bridge. I mean, eventually they're going to blame the Russians for that one somehow. One of the cargo containers on the ship had Russian links. Okay, wait for that. I'm not joking. I'm not joking.
You're absolutely right. Exactly. Any time there's a mess with air traffic controllers. Hey, well, it was the Russians were jamming the GPS signals. That's it. I mean, it wasn't the basic. We've got aging equipment, and it should be spend some money modernizing equipment. No, it's the Russians.
Well, Russians maybe they were Boeing aircraft. Anybody thought about that? Okay.
Russian jamming, as if, as like the AP, as it, do you know? I mean, has this been established? You just say it as a matter of fact that the Russians were jamming GPS signals. In October, a Baltic Sea gas pipeline and telecoms cables were damaged after a Chinese ship dragged its anchor for over 115 miles in an incident that is still under investigation. So here, we've all forgotten that.
I'm sorry. The ship was later seen in a Russian port.
That's it.
Okay, mystery solved.
Mystery solved. Oh, it's in a Russian port.
Mystery solved.
And you kind of think, I mean, like, what's the mystery here as well? Because it's like, okay, the Chinese ship dragged its anchor for over 115 miles, and then it was seen later in a Russian port. Okay, can you then explain what's the cause and effect? Who did what? I mean, what's actually? I mean, why wouldn't it be in a Russian port? I mean, if there's something wrong with this Chinese ship, yeah, it's going to just land in a Russian port for the repairs.
This is amazing here. In October, a Baltic Sea gas pipeline and telecom cables were damaged after a Chinese ship dragged its anchor for over 115 miles, 185 kilometers, in an incident that's still under investigation. But the Nord Stream isn't still under investigation.
No, that's not under investigation. No. Mystery left for the ages. But again, it's amazing they write this. Oh, well, a Baltic Sea gas pipeline. You think, well, what about the biggest natural disaster or man-made sabotage ever? And that you don't care about, but a Baltic Sea gas pipeline was damaged. Whoa, now we really need to get to the bottom of that. And then here we have another story. Kremlin critics say Russia is targeting its foes abroad with killings, poisonings, and harassment.
Sounds pretty ominous, George.
Very ominous. Despite attempts by Western governments to dismantle Russian spy networks, experts say the Kremlin apparently is still able to pursue those it perceives as traitors abroad in an attempt to silence dissent. It's a little like, the EU, which bans all Russian media, but apparently Putin's disinformation campaign is stronger than ever. So you've banned RT, Sputnik, everything, and yet somehow Putin is getting his disinformation out.
This is that the paragraph is really interesting for the very reason that actually the opposite is true. When you have these people that leave, they badmouth their country in media, they become willing informants or operatives of foreign intelligence agencies, and when they're found out, they're plastered all over Russian media. They're a very powerful soft power tool. See, look what these people are doing against our country, our people, our troops, etc. No, you don't want to hurt them. You want to give them exposure, is what you want to do.
Right.
It's counterintuitive completely.
Right. Opponents of Putin increasingly fear the long arm of Moscow's security services, including in countries they once thought were safe.
Well, everybody, it's been estimated about 2/3 of the men that left after February 2022 have come back. And from what I've heard from people, and of course, it's just my very limited discussion about this, is that, a lot of them were kind of shamed for leaving, but no one's been punished for it because they didn't break the law. Unless you were in the military itself, then that's very, very different. Okay.
Right.
But no,
presumably, if they went abroad and took part in some Western media operations, doing interviews for the BBC, trashing Russia. That's different. Yeah,
that's different.
Yeah. The Kremlin, which routinely denies going after its opponents abroad, has been blamed for decades for such attacks. I love this, which routinely denies going after its opponents abroad. It's like they put this in as if somehow, well, of course, they routinely denied, but of course we know that they do this.
But again, but who is routinely making accusations? Okay,
routinely, exactly. Has been blamed for decades for such attacks. And then he goes on. The most famous cases include Soviet revolutionary turned exile dissident Leon Trotsky. Now, this is very interesting. I mean, this is an AP story. We're talking about, this is now 85 years ago. I love the way you describe him as a dissident. The guy who was kind of carried out, mass, murder on a quite a substantial scale.
Well, Leon Trotsky, he may have the moniker of being one of the first modern mass murderers on an industrial scale. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. But they put, revolutionary turned exile dissident. Oh, well, he's just turned exile dissident. Yeah, that's
it's Solzhenitsyn with a Kalashnikov.
Okay. Exactly. Who was killed in 1940 in Mexico after being attacked with an ice axe by a Soviet agent. And Georgy Markov, a dissident working for the BBC's Bulgarian language service, who died in 1978 in London after being jabbed with a poison-tipped umbrella. Again, you're going back a few years now, and again, but Markov, why are you blaming this on the Russians? I mean, I don't think anyone's ever blamed the Russians for the killing of Markov. So it was always attributed to the Bulgarians. Now, maybe, the Bulgarians were obviously working closely with the KGB, but nonetheless, he was a Bulgarian, and it was the Bulgarians who were pissed off with him.
Yeah, but see what this article does, and it's really sloppy, and it's not smart at all, is that there is first of all, Russians are genetically prone to doing such things like this. That's one thing they want to show. Number two, that there is this continuity from the Soviet Union to the Russian Federation, which I would strongly object to. Okay,
that's right.
Because there's no real evidence of it. I mean, we've been through all of these alleged attacks. The Skripals for something like that.
We're going to come to that as well.
Okay, yeah, but where did it ever go, George?
Right, exactly. That's exactly right. But the thing is also that assassinations are something that all states carry out. It's something that's an ongoing thing. I mean, you really want to go down this path? You really want to talk about,
well,
well,
why don't you talk to Soleimani's family? Okay.
exactly. Exactly.
Talk to the families of the Iranian scientists. Okay.
Right. Exactly. I mean, the whole idea, well, assassinations. This is a Russian practice. Yeah, okay. The Russians have certainly carried out assassinations, as have many, many other states. It's a well-known practice of states. States do very nasty things to their opponents. I mean, that's the way of the world. But well, it's only Russian. We don't do that. Like, we don't do spying. We don't carry out assassinations. You want to go, read the House report on assassinations and the church committee's report on assassination. They went into great details about the various assassinations the U.S. was involved in, and it's gone on since then. Britain was the site of other poisonings blamed on Russian security services under Putin. Defector and former intelligence officer Alexander Litvinenko, I knew Litvinenko was going to come up, died after drinking tea laced with radioactive polonium-210 in 2006, and former spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter fell gravely ill, but recovered following an attack with a Soviet-era nerve agent in 2018, and no one has seen Skripal and his daughter for more than 6 years. And no one thinks that there's something strange about the disappearance of Skripal, this victim of a Russian assassination.
And Alexander Litvinenko, most likely, folks, I mean, because the British authorities will never be transparent about it, either was killed by someone in his circle, could have been Berezovsky under Berezovsky's orders. Berezovsky committed suicide. We'll never know about full extent of his involvement. Or because Litvinenko was, even by admission by his peers, was a real oddball, a really odd guy. He might have just simply poisoned himself,
right,
or he committed suicide through poisoning.
right.
These are all very real possibilities that the British authorities have never entertained.
No,
okay,
because that was the whole point. That's the point. That report was just a piece of
that was just that report. That's just tabloid shit. Excuse me. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Because the British deliberately didn't look into any other possibilities. I mean, they just decided it was the Russians, and then they just put everything together to show that it was the Russians who did it. I mean, that was the whole purpose. So they never looked into any other possibilities.
As a doctor pointed out to me at the time, he said, remember that famous picture of Litvinenko laying in a hospital bed, and he was all peaked? The doctor told me, he said, he would be black and gray, not pink.
Right.
Okay. Because when you have radioactive material, it's killing. It's not giving life, it's destroying. He said, the picture is a complete fraud. It has nothing to do, in his opinion. I am not a doctor.
Right. But the point is that with these assassinations also never really make very much sense. I mean, assassinations can make sense, if you want to prevent something. Let's say Israel, it's reprehensible. Israel kills these Iranian scientists, but you can see the goal. You can see what Israel is trying to do there. When the Americans assassinated Soleimani, again, you can see what they're trying to do. What are you trying to achieve with Skripal? I mean, there's just no reason for it.
Let's give another legitimate case, Daria Dugina, the woman that was behind that.
Right.
Okay, the Russian intelligence community very much would like to see the demise of that person. Okay, there's a goal. Okay, all these other ones, George is right. They're all just really flimsy.
Right. I mean, what do you achieve by killing off Skripal? I mean, he could always have, he had already done time in a Russian prison. They could always have
released.
Yes, and released. The Kremlin repeatedly denied involvement in the British cases. Now, with full-scale domestic crackdown underway inside Russia, most of the Kremlin's political opponents, independent journalists, and activists have moved abroad. There are strong suspicions, as well as accusations from officials, that Moscow is increasingly targeting them. So there's strong suspicions of where are these suspicions coming from? From the Western intelligence services who are peddling this stuff into the media, and they're telling us, well, you know, we've got up to our eyes in work trying to keep track of what the Russians are doing.
There's strong suspicion. Well, you know, there are strong suspicions. I mean, what kind of precision is that, George?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
As well as accusations.
That's right.
Okay.
Strong suspicion, accusations. Okay. Evidence? No. So this is the New York Times. And it says Russia steps up a covert sabotage campaign aimed at Europe. I know it's news to me that they ever stopped the covert sabotage campaign. I mean, oh, it steps up. Wow. They'd obviously taken a vacation. So, says Russian military intelligence, the GRU, is behind arson attacks aimed at undermining support for Ukraine's war effort, security officials say. So, you know, New York Times always takes, this is from today's New York Times, it always takes them a little bit of time to catch up with, you know, other sources. So all the stuff that we've been talking about, you know, oh, well, now the New York Times report, yeah, things are looking very grim in Europe. And says,
yeah, like the New York Times likes to do the summation article.
The summation, exactly. Yes. US and allied intelligence officials are tracking an increase in low-level sabotage operations in Europe that they say are part of a Russian campaign to undermine support for Ukraine's war effort. The covert operations have mostly been arsons or attempted arsons, targeting a wide range of sites, including a warehouse in England, paint factory in Poland, homes in Latvia, and most oddly, an IKEA store in Lithuania.
Really is low-level sabotage.
I guess somebody, you know.
I mean, let's take a look at that here. Mostly have been arsons or attempted arsons targeting a wide range of sites, including a warehouse in England. Now we know where the warehouse is. Okay. A paint factory in Poland, homes in Latvia, and most oddly, an IKEA store. Can you imagine all those things? That is good to make or break the Ukrainian war effort.
That's George. Exactly, yes.
Wow. Wow. Exactly. We had no idea how vulnerable the West.
That's right.
And you take that paint factory out, it's done.
It's done. And of course, Stoltenberg has already sounded off on this. So he's, you know, this list is already enough to get an alarm statement from Stoltenberg. And then he goes on, but people accused of being Russian operatives have also been arrested on charges of plotting attacks on US military bases. So now we're getting to the serious stuff. US military bases, plotting. While the acts might appear random, American and European security officials say they are part of a concerted effort by Russia to slow arms transfers to Kiev and create the appearance of a growing European opposition to support for Ukraine. I don't understand how, you know, blowing up an IKEA store is somehow going to, you know, well, this Ukraine effort is really unpopular.
Enough of Ukraine.
And the officials say Russia's military intelligence arm, the GRU, is leading the campaign. The attacks, at least so far, have not interrupted the weapons flow to Ukraine. And indeed, many of the targets are not directly related to the war. No, I mean, we noticed that.
I don't know, George. So let's say there's a colonel in the GRU, and he's supposed to come up with some kind of low-intensity plan to disrupt the war effort in Ukraine. So he visits his boss. I think we need to take out a paint factory, sir. Okay. I mean, I think he would be laughed out of the room.
That's right.
Okay.
A paint factory. Well, I know. I prefer the IKEA store.
Yeah, Lithuania could be kicked out of the NATO over this. Okay, let's go after the IKEA
exactly.
store. Okay?
This could be the end.
Don't hit the buffet because
That's
I
right.
liked IKEA's buffet when they were still in Moscow. I liked it. I liked those Swedish meatballs really with the cranberry sauce. Excellent.
But some security officials say Russia is trying to sow fear and force European nations to add security throughout the weapons supply chains, adding costs and slowing the pace of transfers.
Well, the cat's out of the bag, isn't it?
So they have to add security. So that's going to slow things down. Whoa. Now that sounds like a plan. You know, you
Well, everybody, this entire New York Times article was written just to have that bullet point there.
that's it.
But the whole article revolves around
Right.
that.
Right, right. But it's interesting because the New York Times at least tries to offer an explanation. I mean, we were talking about all those other things, and they were all denouncing Putin, the Russians. But the New York Times said, yeah, well, what's really behind this is the supply chain, and it's adding costs to the supply chain, and therefore slowing the pace of transfers. NATO and European leaders have been warning of the growing threat. Prime Minister Kaja Kallas of Estonia said last week that Russia was conducting a shadow war against Europe. It's amazing, you know, Kallas, you know, she says this, and then there she is, you know, suddenly she's now being talked about that in New York Times. You know, look at me. I made it to the New York Times. Prime Minister Donald Tusk of Poland announced the arrest of 12 people accused of carrying out beatings, arson and attempted arson for Russian intelligence. And Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre of Norway said Russia posed a, quote, real and serious threat after his country warned about possible attacks targeting energy producers and arms factories. So again, possible attacks and nothing's going on. And again, you know, as far as energy, you know, Nord Stream pipelines, that's off the table. That we don't need to talk about. And then, amid the growing concern about sabotage, NATO ambassadors are set to meet next month with Avril Haines, the US Director of National Intelligence. Ms. Haines will provide an intelligence briefing on Russia's war in Ukraine, but she will also discuss Moscow's covert sabotage in Europe. Security officials would not describe their intelligence linking the sabotage to the GRU, but American and British spy services have penetrated the GRU deeply. Before the war in Ukraine, the United States and Britain released a declassified piece of intelligence exposing various GRU plans to create a false pretext for Russia's invasion. Now, you know, this is so dishonest. You know, the US intelligence and the British intelligence have been doing these victory laps saying, we got it right. We got it right about what Russia's, you know, that they were going to invade, you know, and they've been celebrating, congratulating themselves. They got it completely wrong. They got it totally wrong. Here's the link. I'll show you what they actually reported at the time, which is it's linked in this Times. Oh, you know, deeply. We penetrated it deeply. It says here, U.S. exposes what it says is Russian effort to fabricate pretext for invasion. Officials said Russia was planning a fake video showing an attack by Ukrainians on Russian territory or Russian speakers in eastern Ukraine. There was no fake video. There was no false pretext. None of it. None of that happened. And it says, the United States has acquired intelligence about a Russian plan to fabricate a pretext for an invasion of Ukraine using a faked video that would build on recent disinformation campaigns. And then, according to senior administration officials and others briefed on the material,
I remember this now.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. That's right. The plan, which the United States hopes to spoil by making public, involves staging and filming a fabricated attack by the Ukrainian military, either on Russian territory or against Russian-speaking people in eastern Ukraine. None of that happened. But what they're doing is that they're doing this, oh, they penetrated the GRU. We got it right. They didn't get it right. And of course, there were a lot of other stories that they're not presented because they were saying about how they were going to, you remember, they were going to kill Zelensky, they were going to arrest, you know, the entire Ukrainian elite, execute them, you know, they were going to set up.
They're still recycling that. They're still recycling that.
Right. None of that happened. And you know, the insolence of doing this victory laps. Oh, we got it right. You didn't get it right. You got this wrong, just as like you got Trump Russia wrong, just like you got Russian interference in the 2016 campaign wrong. You have a consistent record of getting it wrong. And then the video was intended to be elaborate, officials said, with plans for graphic images of the stage corpse-strewn aftermath of an explosion and footage of destroyed locations. They said the video was also said to include a faked Ukrainian military equipment, Turkish-made drones, and actors playing Russian-speaking mourners. American officials would not say precisely who in Russia was planning the operation, but a senior official said the GRU, Russia's military intelligence arm, was deeply involved in the effort.
You know what, George? You know what my suspicion is that this was a double cross. They have this is it shows just how the GRU has infiltrated American intelligence, meaning they passed this story to operatives, and they passed it along, thinking this is a real scoop. But they were just going to see, how if it would get legs, and it did get legs. They actually believed it.
Right. No, that's right. Well, if you think about stage videos, like Bucha, that was a kind of a stage video.
Very.
Including Ursula von der Leyen's theatrical gasp of horror. And then a British official said its government had done its own analysis of the intelligence and had high confidence that Russia was planning to engineer a pretext to blame Ukraine for an attack. Oh, I love it when the British confirm what the Americans have found. It's really touching. Like when the Americans confirm what the British found, like when George W. Bush about yellow cake. It's always nice. Another British official, Liz Truss, the foreign secretary, that's a name from the past. It said the intelligence was, quote, clear and shocking evidence of Russia's unprovoked aggression and underhand activity to destabilize Ukraine.
Well, look what happened to you, Liz.
Okay. That's right. The UK and our allies will continue to expose Russian subterfuge and propaganda and call it out for what it is. That's before she kind of reinvented herself as a populist. Just she's against the deep state. So anyway, back to this New York Times article. So that's from 2022, British and other European diplomats have been pressing countries to call out Russian covert operations more aggressively. One of the first of recent sabotage acts.
I mean, why do you have to say that more aggressively? Either you do it or you don't do it. I don't understand this. Okay?
No, but I think that was what Kaya Kallas, she was complaining. It's not aggressive enough. And I never know what Kaya Kallas wants. I think she just wants to throw all Russians should just be thrown out of Europe. I mean, there should just not be any Russians at all in Europe.
I don't think she even has that strong of a conviction. You said it, George. You already said it. She made it into the New York Times. That's what she wants. That's all.
I think so. Yeah. One of the first of recent sabotage acts attributed to Russia was a March fire at a warehouse in London. Authorities say the warehouse was connected with the effort to supply Ukraine, but have provided few details.
No, yeah, right.
Okay. So you have a warehouse, a fire, but there's few details.
Yeah, well, insurance scams happen all of the time.
Yeah, particularly in warehouses where you can avoid, human casualties. So, boom, spontaneous combustion. Security officials briefed on the incident said GRU operatives used a Russian diplomatic building in Sussex, England, to recruit locals to carry out the arson. 4 British men have been charged with arson in the attack, and one of them has been charged with assisting a foreign intelligence service. In response, Britain expelled a Russian military officer working for intelligence services and closed several Russian diplomatic buildings, including the GRU Operations Center in Sussex. Now, I love this kind of GRU Operations Center. I am sure it's not a GRU operation. I mean, well, this is a GRU Operations Center in Sussex. Oh, okay, that's fine.
Right next to the coffee shop. Yeah,
exactly. Right. Yeah, you and then you have a sign above it: GRU Operations Center.
Well, George, I mean, to kind of think counterintuitively, the West needs to be more aggressive against Russian covert operations. But if they're targeting a paint factory and a warehouse, is there that much to worry about? I mean, if that's it's not like the House of Commons is being targeted.
Right. Yes.
It's not like the Pentagon is being targeted. or poisoning a reservoir or something like that. I mean, if the West, if it's going to be make or break over a paint factory, then maybe they have to reconsider what their priorities are.
Yeah. But that's the whole point. I mean, we're going through these stories and you think, you haven't even remotely made the case. I mean, you're trying to gin up terror about the Russians, and this is your best. This is the best case you've got. Well, yeah, the Trotsky, George Markov, and then paint factory, IKEA, and then some guys in Poland who have been arrested for beatings. Are Russians particularly the beat? Is that part of the Russian operation, beatings?
It's the biggest mystery of these series of articles. Who was beaten and why?
Exactly. Because they don't do it, obviously, because if you start beatings, because they got into a fight over something, and hence the beatings. I mean,
I think it's the assailants that were beating each other. Yeah,
exactly. And says, the use of local recruits, security officials says, has been a hallmark of the recent sabotage campaign. US and European officials said that is partly to make attacks more difficult to detect and to make them appear to be the result of domestic opposition to supporting Ukraine. Sabotage acts.
Are you expecting them to like parachute a Russian intelligence officer that can't speak English into the UK? I mean, yeah, local recruits. That's part of the job.
Yes, exactly. But they're not doing much. I mean, that's the local recruits. I mean, you got a fire in a warehouse, Ukrainian link. They haven't even said the warehouse is in any way linked with arms for Ukraine. It's just a warehouse. Sabotage acts by Russia in Europe are not unknown. Good. Now we go back to play some golden oldies. In 2014, Russian military intelligence blew up an ammunition depot in the Czech Republic, although the country did not publicly blame Russia until 7 years later.
7 years later. 7 years later.
Okay. Which is very, so that's very interesting because you go, so you did this, and then 7 years ago, when it was convenient, you said, yeah. You remember that we had that explosion, and it was the Russians what did it. And again, the Times just sort of reports this without thinking. It's a little odd for you to somehow attribute it to the Russians 7 years later.
Well, somebody was holding that card close to their chest, and then they played it.
Yeah. And then so that's the sort of the terror that
state of play, the state of play.
That's right. But that they're getting the public very, very nervous. Because of course there are also all the elections, the European elections, the presidential elections, and the stories are already churning. The newsrooms in the United States and in Europe are already drafting the stories about Putin's interference in the elections.
Everybody should appreciate what George and I are doing because we're chronicling this in real time, the buildup of a propaganda effort to scare the hell out of you, make you fear walking on the street, okay? Don't talk to your neighbors, and if you do, denounce them. I mean, this is exactly what they want. Look at every single conflict of the last 50 years, and it's always the same game plan.
That's right.
All the time. There are subversives among us. Oh my goodness! And the Russians are genetically predisposed to doing this. I mean, I'm glad George did this, but it's so banal. It's so banal.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, an ammo dump blew up in 2014, and then you finally pin it on someone conveniently in 2021. Conveniently, okay.
Yes. That's right. And that's it. I mean, but it's a wonderful way of not addressing any of the real problems any of the countries are facing. You got terrible problems in the UK, Germany, France, Italy. You got an awful lot of problems. And what are we talking about? We're talking about Russia.
Well, we're really lucky that we have this oracle in Estonia that you can explain it to all of us, okay? In her little gear. Oh, she's so cute looking in that helmet, isn't
Yes,
she?
exactly. Yes, and that's why she was there. They had the photograph of her, and was very chic. Very very chic. She could have easily worn some baggy fatigues that were too big for her, and you wouldn't have noticed her. But she was wearing this very chic, and the helmet and the
I
sunglasses.
think that she may be hawking NATO perfume soon, don't you think? In a little light jewelry line to go with it. Okay.
Yes,
And
yes.
I could just imagine what that NATO handbag was going to look like. Whoa. Okay. That's going to be a hot item
Yeah,
on Amazon.
I think so. Absolutely. I can see her getting some big job in
Oh,
NATO. I mean, isn't she a candidate for Stoltenberg's job? Isn't she one of
of
the
course
candidates?
she is. She's a
Yeah,
candidate for everything.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And just in case, Soros and the Koch brother, and we have Tony Blair. Got a lot of options. She's
Yeah,
young.
yeah.
Okay, I mean, this is the sky's the limit, hun.
That's right.
You
That's
can't,
right.
catch her before she flies off. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah.
I mean, you and I obviously make fun of this here, but what can you imagine a better front person? This is perfect.
Yeah. That's
Perfect.
right.
We're
And I think,
serious. We're
yeah,
serious about that.
yeah. That's right. And I think she actually put, now she actually put herself forward as a candidate because she was unhappy with the Dutch guy, this Mark Rutte, who seemed to have the job sewn up. And then she came in and said, "No, why are we always giving it to a West European? What about me?" And then she said, "Well, we can't really give it to an Estonian." But then Orban said, "No, absolutely not for Rutte, because he said really bad things about Hungary, and in fact he proposed throwing Hungary out of the EU." And of course, Hungary is just simply not going to support him under any circumstances. So Rutte's candidacy is gone. I don't think Orban's going to support her either, to be honest. So she may not be in that position, but she could come in as number two to whoever's got the job.
Who is available, George? Recently left government. She's got a nice cushy gig at Columbia. She's opining again.
Yes,
I
she's a
think I think there's a possibility Victoria Nuland will make her
I agree, but
triumphant return.
well, I mean, I think she would be the logical person, but the way they've done it, they've usually not given it to that position. The Secretary General position goes to a European. The way it goes is the SACEUR job always goes to an American. Supreme Allied Command is always an American, but the Secretary General is a European. So they have to. I mean, they can do it, but they'd
These
have
are
to break the.
trying times. We need a steady hand
That's
on the
true.
wheel.
That's
Okay.
true. Yeah.
I look, I think it's a remote possibility, but I don't think it's an
No, I
impossibility
agree.
either.
I agree. I agree. And you have to say that who else is it? Because whom can they all agree on?
Well, no one's going to say no to her out of
Right.
fear. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
And this will show because Trump is coming back.
Yes.
Ring a bell. You
Yes.
have a steady hand there,
Right.
and it's all. Again, I think it's a remote possibility, but it's not an impossibility.
I agree. I mean, you could say it's an extreme situation. We need, drastic times call for drastic measures. Say, yeah, she's and you're absolutely right. Who would oppose her? Say, hey, well, who's more qualified?
Yeah,
So
she's at the epicenter of all of it.
exactly.
If you're looking for fingerprints, Vicky's
Exactly,
fingerprints are
single-handedly gave
everywhere.
us the Ukraine crisis. Thank you very much. So yeah. No, but I
Well,
mean, I think
everyone,
you've got a point there. You have a point.
just get you. This is, George and I think we had one of our best podcasts yesterday. I really think that because, there are voices that a lot of you here listen to that are trying to convince you that Ukraine's on its last legs. Right. Okay. Right. In many ways it is. I've never disagreed with that. And George and I, argued and quibbled and all that for over 2 years. Okay. But Ukraine is losing. There's no doubt about it. But NATO doesn't want defeat.
That's
and
right.
see, this is tipping
right.
the conversation. All right. Because it's less and less about Ukraine, and it's about the integrity of this military alliance, okay,
right.
which, you know, it's in bed with Ukraine. I don't know, I'm running out of metaphors, but I mean,
Right.
it's identifies completely with that project. It
Right.
will go to great lengths, and I don't think we've even begun to see what they're going to do. That's why I'm very worried right now.
Right.
And this media campaign that George has so skillfully demonstrated to us, this is the buildup to it,
Right.
to fill in the spaces, okay, connect all these dots, because I'm really worried about some really scary things that could possibly happen. And they're out there, okay?
Yeah.
Destroying that radar station that George and I at great length talked about here is no
Yes.
coincidence. It was
Yes.
very focused, and it
Yeah.
had nothing to do about what's going on the battlefield in Ukraine.
Oh, exactly, exactly. No, it's a very serious situation. I mean, you know, you can't just have NATO making strategic attacks against targets inside Russia, targets that are basically directed at the United States and at NATO, not at Ukraine. So basically, NATO is using Ukraine as a cover for launching attacks on Russian territory, and that's not a situation Russia can accept.
Right, and these things that I think that we saw, and I think we will see, will have nothing to do with the battlefield situation in Ukraine. It'll become more and more obvious. Meanwhile, someone's trying to blow up a paint factory in, you know, in some European country.
Right.
It's all in parallel. It
exactly.
Works. It's in lockstep. It's a deeply well-funded, well-personed project
exactly.
to prepare us all for the unimaginable.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely. I think this is the propaganda campaign. Media are only too happy to play their role, whip us up into this fervor about Russia. Not only is Russia doing this, threatening NATO, threatening us with attack, but it's undermining our institutions. It's there, you know, it's there, it's doing spying, sabotage, whatever. So yeah, it's absolutely, the public is being prepared for this.
Keep in mind, George and I have not come down one way or another about what happened at the Crocus City Hall concert. And still, we need to know information. It really bothers me that so many other people have made such strong statements.
Right.
But irrespective of how that came about, there's one thing that is very clear, is that it is acceptable in Western NATO capitals it's acceptable to have high casualty rates among civilians. That's really important. Yeah. That's really important because even though, oh, it's terrible and all that, no, but there is an implicit understanding that Russian civilians are targets too in this conflict, okay?
Right.
That's the way it works. Not our people, of course, but theirs.
Yeah.
Okay. And so there's many, many layers right here. I'm not trying to pull back from the things that I've said before. I think the outcome of this military conflict in Ukraine is obvious. Well, how we get there is not so obvious.
That's the point. Of course, you know, Ukraine cannot defeat Russia. I think we always agreed on that. You know, Russia's 4 times its size, you know, resource rich and so on. The problem has always been NATO. You know, once NATO gets involved, who knows what happens? You know, there's all sorts of nightmarish scenarios down the road. So it's always been the danger of this war. So, and you know, as we saw today, you know, we're being prepared, we're being played, and that's rather ominous.
Yeah, we're getting the Ukraine project version of yellow cake. Everybody, that's what we're getting right now.
That's right.
All right, everybody, this is The Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on Locals, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. Today is Monday. That means tomorrow George has his first live stream, Tuesday,
3 p.m. Eastern Time. Please come with comments, criticisms, ideas, suggestions, opinions. On the way out the door, think about Johnny Apple, who is once again, I kind of sleep through these because, you know,
and it's getting bigger, everybody. Look, he's getting bigger.
He's getting a lot big. He's really big. Yeah. And he says, well, no thanks to the tip jar. That's not contributing to anything. So if you've got a few bob in your pocket, whip them out, dunk them into the tip jar. We're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, and the more likely it is that Johnny Apple is going to wake up and join us one of these days. It's going to be hard, but you know, maybe you'll do it. So remember, if you like The Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.